The moment my father called me uneducated trash, the entire room went silent. 20 relatives stared at me. My mother crossed her arms. My older brother smirked. And then my father pointed at the front door. "Get out, you lowlife. You'll never amount to anything." For a second I thought he was joking. He wasn't. 5 minutes later I was standing outside with a single suitcase and nowhere to go. What none of them knew was that I had been hiding a secret for almost 3 years. A secret worth millions. So I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply left. 3 weeks later they came looking for me. And before we continue, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It really helps us bring you more powerful stories like this. And I'm always curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments below. I love seeing just how far these stories travel. Now let's get back to the story. My name is Emma Carter, and I was 28 years old the night my father threw me out of the house. It happened during what was supposed to be a celebration. My parents had invited relatives over for dinner because my older brother, Jason, had just been promoted at his engineering firm. The dining room was packed with aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends. Everyone praised Jason. Everyone except me. I sat quietly at the end of the table, smiling whenever someone looked my way. That should have been enough. It wasn't. "So, Emma," my aunt asked loudly, "have you finally decided what you're doing with your life?" A few people chuckled. I forced a smile. "I'm working on some projects." My brother smirked. "Projects?" Several relatives laughed. I stared at my plate. For years I'd learned that defending myself only made things worse. My father leaned back in his chair. "Projects is what people say when they don't have a real job." More laughter. My mother nodded. "Jason has a career. Emma has hobbies." The room erupted again. I felt heat rising into my face, but I stayed silent. The truth was simple. 3 years earlier I had dropped out of college. Not because I was lazy. Not because I couldn't handle the work. But because I wanted to build something of my own. Nobody in my family cared about that explanation. To them, quitting college meant failure. End of discussion. Jason raised his glass. "At least one of us turned out successful." More laughter. My father pointed toward him proudly. "That's what discipline looks like." Then he looked at me. "And that's what happens when someone wastes opportunities." The room became uncomfortably quiet. I could feel every pair of eyes on me. I considered standing up and leaving. Instead I stayed seated. That seemed to irritate my father even more. "You know what your problem is?" he snapped. I didn't answer. "You think you're smarter than everyone else." My mother folded her arms. "She's been wasting years chasing fantasies." The criticism kept coming. One comment after another. Each one worse than the last. Then my father slammed his hand on the table. The sound made everyone jump. "I'm tired of this." The room fell silent. He stood and pointed toward the front door. "Get out." I blinked. Nobody spoke. For a second I thought I'd misunderstood. Then he pointed again. "Get out, you lowlife." My stomach dropped. "Dad." "No." His voice echoed through the room. "If you want to waste your life, do it somewhere else." Nobody defended me. Not one person. So I stood, walked upstairs, packed a suitcase, and left. The night air felt cold against my skin. I reached my car and tossed the suitcase into the trunk. Then my phone vibrated. An email notification appeared on the screen. I opened it. Read the first sentence. And for the first time that night, I smiled, because everything was about to change. The email came from a company I'd been trying to reach for almost 8 months. I read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Then I sat in my car outside my parents' house and laughed. Not because being thrown out was funny, because the timing was unbelievable. 3 years earlier, when I left college, everyone assumed I'd quit because I couldn't handle the pressure. The truth was completely different. I discovered something I was passionate about. Software design, business automation, digital systems. Every spare hour I studied online courses, watched tutorials, read books, and practiced until 2 in the morning. While my friends were posting vacation photos, I was teaching myself skills most people had never heard of. The first year was brutal. I built products nobody wanted, created websites that earned almost nothing, worked part-time jobs to cover rent and food. There were months when I barely broke even. Months when quitting seemed like the smartest choice. My parents saw those struggles and treated them as proof they had been right all along. Every family gathering felt like an interrogation. When are you getting a real job? When are you going back to school? When will you finally grow up? I heard those questions so often that I could predict them before they were asked. What nobody knew was that every failure taught me something. Every mistake improved my skills. Every setback pushed me forward. Slowly things started changing. Small clients became larger clients. Larger clients referred other businesses. My income grew. Not enough to impress anyone, but enough to keep building. Then came the project. The one I'd spent nearly a year developing. The software platform that consumed every weekend, every holiday, and every late night. The platform connected companies with automated reporting systems that saved them hundreds of hours each month. I believed in it, even when nobody else did. Especially when nobody else did. The email sitting on my phone confirmed what I'd hoped for. A major technology company wanted an exclusive licensing agreement. Not a trial. Not a meeting. A deal. The following week felt unreal. Lawyers. Contracts. Video conferences. Negotiations. Then the agreement was finalized. The payment that landed in my account was larger than anything I'd ever seen. More money than I had earned in the previous several years combined. For the first time in my life, I wasn't worried about bills. I wasn't worried about survival. I was thinking about the future. I rented a luxury apartment downtown, hired a small team, opened an office, changed my phone number, and focused entirely on growing the business. Meanwhile, my family heard nothing. As far as they knew, I was still the same failure who had left their house carrying a suitcase. That assumption lasted exactly 3 weeks. Because on a quiet Monday morning while I was reviewing contracts in my new office, my assistant appeared at the door. She looked confused. "Emma," she said carefully, "there's a man downstairs asking for you." I frowned. "Who is it?" She hesitated, then spoke 2 words that made my stomach tighten. "Your father." For a moment I thought I had heard her wrong. "My father." I repeated. My assistant nodded. "He's downstairs with your mother and brother." I leaned back in my chair. 3 weeks. That was all it had taken. 3 weeks after being thrown out like garbage, they had somehow found me. I took a slow breath, then stood. "Send them up." A few minutes later, the office doors opened. The first person through was my father. The same man who had pointed at the door and called me a lowlife. Behind him came my mother. Then Jason. The second they stepped inside, all 3 stopped walking. Their eyes moved across the office. The glass walls. The employees working at nearby desks. The company logo mounted behind my desk. The corner office. My office. Jason looked confused. My mother looked stunned. My father looked like he couldn't process what he was seeing. I stayed seated. "Hello." Nobody answered immediately. Finally, my mother spoke. "Emma, this place belongs to you?" "Yes." The silence that followed was almost painful. Jason glanced around again. "You're the owner?" "I am." My father slowly lowered himself into a chair. For the first time in my life, he seemed completely speechless. Eventually, he cleared his throat. "We didn't know." I almost laughed. Of course they didn't know. They had never asked. They had already decided who I was years ago. My mother looked down. "We heard about the deal." News traveled fast, especially when millions of dollars were involved. My father stared at the floor. "We may have judged you too quickly." "May have." Not did. May have. Some things never changed. Jason finally spoke. "How much is the company worth?" The question didn't surprise me. Felt exactly like something he would ask. I smiled politely. "Enough." Nobody said anything after that. The room felt smaller than before. My father looked older somehow. Less certain. Less powerful. Finally, he looked at me. "I made a mistake." There was. The closest thing to an apology I was ever likely to receive. I nodded. "You did." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We want to fix this." I looked at all 3 of them, then shook my head gently. You don't fix relationships when someone becomes successful. Nobody had an answer for that. I stood and walked them toward the door. Before they left, my father turned back. "I'm proud of you." For years, those were the words I'd wanted most. Now they felt strangely unimportant. "Thank you," I said. Then they left. As the elevator doors closed behind them, I returned to my office. Because in the end, the real victory wasn't the company. It wasn't the money. It was finally knowing my worth long before they did.